So as you know,
Yeah.
December is peak Christmas cookie season for mom.
Yeah. Hit me. What's Joyce got?
I think there are 36 varieties this year. And
Lord.
there's usually 2 batches of each so that everybody can get the ones that they like. But there was some sort of consternation over like a planning situation. And at one point she just turned and looked at me and she was like, and as you know, December is cookie month. And I was like, yes, mom. Yes,
straight
mom.
straight out of a holiday film, our Joyce Carol.
Straight out of a Hallmark movie. So I was like, yeah, please. I mean, but I already have, like, we have employees start asking about Christmas cookies here in like October.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they're a thing.
What party was I at this summer? The 30th anniversary.
The 30th anniversary, yeah.
Where they kept coming up to your mom and being like, I'm excited for Christmas cookies, Mrs. Nielsen. I was like, this is amazing.
A key part of running a family business is feeding people.
Feeding people, for sure.
Feeding people. So I'm actually in the process of looking at caterers for our Christmas party. And I know there's like all these options. I think I'm just going to go barbecue because I want it like, because all they're really going to care about is the cookies.
Yeah. Like they'll eat the free lunch because they always do. But like.
Because who doesn't like a free lunch?
Yeah.
But I mean, the core of, because December is cookie month.
December is cookie month, as you were so emphatically told.
Every time I watch our little trailer and we end on that, like where we got to give that workshop in person, I was like, oh, I miss excuses to wear pencil skirts and tights. Like,
I know.
It's time to do that again.
It's so wintry, that picture. I love that picture because both our eyes are closed, but it's literally like the best picture we have of the two of us speaking.
Yeah. So far. Yeah, because life is written in pencil. So far. I have no good transition into the first empathy exercise, but I think it's mine.
It is, yeah, and then the rest were me because I did
were you.
Flurry of them last night while watching the news.
I saw. That's okay. I'm going to talk mostly about the main topic, so we balance. All right, this one comes to us from our incredible Canadian correspondent, Jay.
Hi, Jay.
Who sent this to me via the Discord a couple days ago, that Kraft Peanut Butter is going to help essentially subsidized epinephrine to help people with food allergies. Here, usually it's $120. This is an EpiPen for anyone who isn't aware. And it is launching, I love this, Protection for Peanuts, a fund to help offset the life-saving epinephrine injections, and has teamed up with Alexis Lafreniere, an NHL player with a life-threatening peanut allergy, to help spread awareness. So look at this, introducing Protection for Peanuts.
Love it. Way to go, Alex.
So I don't know if this peanut butter will be available south of the border. Obviously, this is a Canadian bottle, but if it is, then I will definitely be supporting it because A, I love peanut butter, and B, I don't like people dying from allergic reactions. So it kind of seems like a win-win.
Sames. I know and love several humans who are allergic to peanuts, and it's not good.
Not good. And EpiPens are hella expensive. So
America. All right. This one, it's hilarious. I was just looking at the headline, prepping to realize that I selected this article yesterday and technically should have selected one from this morning because it happened. Mm-hmm. So we'll change the tense on this. Barbados has ditched Britain's queen. That's not very nice of a headline, but that's the truth. So in a ceremony yesterday, I think last night, the former British colony and former member of the British Commonwealth, Barbados, completely took their independence. So they gained independence in 1966. and then revived a plan to become a republic completely independent of the Queen and the Commonwealth last September. And they decided to do it. So they pulled down the flag of the United Kingdom. The Queen is no longer the monarch of Barbados. The heir apparent sometime in the future, Prince Charles will be, or it was present at the ceremony. And now, very excitingly, they have the first female president, the first president ever, is a lady. So super excited for Barbados. There was a terrible headline in RTE though today that I almost saved that was like something like British acknowledged slavery or something, and I was like, what
They would not do that.
I mean, they've already done it, but like it was just what Prince Charles said. He acknowledged like the horrific legacy of slavery, but that was missing from the headline. And I was just like, headlines, they matter. I'm scrolling because I'm trying to find the president's name because I know
it's Sandra Mason. Isn't it?
Okay. I didn't think that was her, but I could be wrong. Let me see. Yes, she will. You are correct. I thought because the prime minister is also a lady and I was getting their names confused. You are correct. So Sandra Mason, who is a former jurist, will be sworn in as the first ever president of the island nation. And she was sworn in late last night. So, if you follow our coverage of The Crown, we talk a lot about the Commonwealth, and The Crown actually in season 2 dealt some with the Commonwealth and Queen Elizabeth's travels there. And then I guess we got the Charles and Diana visit to Australia as well, which is part of the Commonwealth. And we have beloved friends who watch our GDDs who live in a Commonwealth country in Canada. So exciting to see the end of colonial rule. I would argue with Barbados that they cannot put their colonial past behind them, as they have said they are now going to do. There's a lot of symbolism in becoming a republic and a lot of significance, but there's no going back to before you were colonized, sadly, in terms of the impact that that's had on their country. But we wish them all the best. We wish all the best luck to Sandra Mason and her journey as the first president. And, we'll keep a weather eye on other former colonies and Commonwealth members. All right, up next, we have 2 deaths and a promotion are my final... are my 3 kind of quick empathy exercises. Had I found these before yesterday afternoon, they probably would have gone up on the Instagram, but we didn't have really any for the Instagram, so I thought this would be good to highlight these. So first up, yesterday we had the death of Lee Elder, who was the first Black golfer to play in the Masters and helped pave the way for integrated golf, which is historically a hella white sport. And especially that he was allowed to play at the Masters, which is the pinnacle of American golf as well. And so they had a couple of quotes from Jack Nicklaus, who's apparently never going to die. He must be like 170. He's not that old, but I feel like he is. So it's particularly significant because the article that we have in the show notes for you that we're sharing now states that he was a native Texan who developed his love of golf by caddying during segregated times. And so it's really important to remember that he would have come into the sport when society was segregated, not only the sport. And so we salute and honor Lee Elder, as Pro Golf did yesterday as well. And, paved the way for a lot of other folks and a lot of other fields. Sadly, the second obituary we have like an obit section of the GDDs, of the empathy exercises. A lot of people were talking about yesterday the death of Virgil Abloh, who was the artistic director for Louis Vuitton, and I believe the first Black artistic director of a fashion house. And so a lot of people were talking about the impact that he had on fashion and representation. He was also a DJ, and he collaborated musically and fashion-wise with, what are we calling him now? Yeezy, Kanye West, whatever. And Jay-Z. And so really brought a lot of elements of African-American and Black culture into the work that he did, and died very tragically, only 41 years of age, from cancer over the weekend. So saluting, he was a person I didn't really know or had heard of before his death, because I'm not big in the fashion. But I think it's really cool to kind of explore the influence that he had on high fashion and that art and the work that he did for Louis Vuitton. All right.
He was Ghanaian American. Let me just throw that out there.
Yes, he was. His parents were Ghanaian immigrants. Very lovely parents. They showed a picture last night in the news when I was watching. So 2 obits and a promotion. We're ending on a promotion. Janet Rollé, I apologize if I mispronounce your surname, Janet, is made history as the first Black American ballet theater company CEO. So, pretty much everything, thanks colonialism. See, all of my empathy exercises kind of work together. So because of colonialism, everything is pretty much white dominated, every industry, every profession. And so we're highlighting people that have broken those boundaries. And so Janet is one of them. Professional dance is hella white. Don't let Center Stage fool you in its faux diversity. That was not a documentary.
Excellent point.
I always got to be real with folks here. But we salute her love of dance. And prior to this, she was the general manager of Beyonce's Parkwood Entertainment for 5 years. So she's the new CEO and executive director of the American Ballet Theater. She credited her mother, who is an immigrant from Jamaica, for forming the foundation of her career and taking her to her first dance lesson when she was 8. So excited to see what Janet brings to the role at the American Ballet Theater. I don't know anyone who knows ballet, but maybe we'll find somebody who will tell us if she does something, even if it's just the internet, but I'm looking forward to it.
We know Trisha, and Trisha is a former professional ballerina. So
that's right. I forgot about Auntie Trisha. We do
Auntie
know
Trisha.
Yes, so we'll have to ask her about this and keep a weather eye on what the ABT is going to do.
Yeah. So our main topic this week, we're going to leave the screen up here because there's a couple things I want to scroll through as we talk about it. But we're going to move on to the main topic now, which is about the absolute clusterfuck that is Activision Blizzard. Couple disclaimers up front. My husband is a former employee of Activision. He was brought to Los Angeles from Ireland to work for Microsoft and then recruited by a company called Vivendi. And Vivendi was bought out by Activision. And so we have like an anti-Activision game rule in my house because he's always hated them. But you may know them because they publish Call of Duty, which is one of the more incredible, famous, but Crash Bandicoot is also another one for folks who have kids. Blizzard in particular, when that merger happened, they are most known for World of Warcraft, the massive online role-playing game that has been going on for a minute, like a really long time. And also now one of their more popular products, Activision Blizzard, is called Overwatch, which some of you who aren't gamers still may have heard of. A lot of their other properties, Doom, are like really good classic games. But they're all super dude oriented, all of them. And so it's not like super de-duper surprising to find out that there was a bro culture so bad at Activision that the state of California sued them under the Fair Housing and Employment Act. So this article here in Kotaku, which we will link in the show notes, is literally like everything that has happened since July the 20th, which is insane.
Yeah.
and I'm just going to keep scrolling here as we're talking. There is calls for various, like Xbox has actually talked about not carrying Activision Blizzard games anymore if this situation is not resolved.
Yeah.
And PlayStation is the same. World of Warcraft folks have been leaving their accounts in protest over how this is being handled. Of course, there's been no really talk about it on their social media at all, but it's all these various ex-bosses that just keep saying, I failed you. And if you just keep scrolling, they're all dudes. They're all dudes. And then these are often what the fantasy creature women look like in their games. So I should say I love a lot of women who really, really love Activision games. One of my friends is incredible at Call of Duty, and it's her self-care. She likes shooting bad guys. Cool. Rock on. And I know my husband has lots of folks that he loves, that he played World of Warcraft forever and still has dear friends that he played with, including many women. So this is not in any way a slight against the gamers, but this is about the culture that they were creating. The sexual harassment was not just limited to women. It also happened to male staffers. There was a lot of games around genitalia and touching other people's bodies. There was lots of jokes about paying for things with sex. So all of this kind of stuff. There was a walkout. There's all these kind of things. And this is the one I want to get to really quickly before we go anywhere else. To me, this is really indicative of the kind of culture that Activision had before the lawsuit. And I'll get to the lawsuit fully in a minute. So the developers had this is an industry-wide kind of thing. I asked my husband about this. Everybody knew about the Cosby suite, which to me is just as crass as calling something the Weinstein suite. So it was based on images that one of the main developers posted on Facebook. It was a booze-filled meeting place where many would pose with an actual portrait of Bill Cosby while smiling. And it was a hotspot for informal networking at BlizzCon, which was their big conference, where people looking to make inroads at the company would go meet and hang out with some of its top designers. None of this vibe tells me that they're doing that because he was a really funny guy. Like, this vibe is, hey, we're super into the guy who drugged women. And this is the kind of energy we're trying to give off here. So, like I said, it just keeps going, guys. Like, look at all of this. Look at all of this. So we'll link it in the show notes so that you don't have to, so that I'm not going to keep reading this. But basically, I mean, I could go on about this forever. My husband is still in Northern Ireland due to a COVID protocol issue. And so I'm gutted because last night we were going to plan out, he was going to give me this whole sketch for today and get really excited because he has so many feelings.
So many thoughts and feelings.
But the basic deal is that their culture was so toxic and so against human rights that the California Department of Fair Housing and Labor sued them for a bro culture. At the same time, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission on the federal government has brought a $18 million lawsuit against them for improper firing and treatment of employees. There's some turf wars happening between the feds and the state of California over who gets to yell at them the loudest, essentially. But since there's a link of that in the show notes too, because why would anything just be about protecting the victims? That would be silly. But since then, there's been the CEO said that he was gonna, we're all gonna do better. Nearly all of the apologies sounded good on the surface, but none of them addressed let's try again. None of them addressed the specific requests of the workers, including, and most importantly, the end of the arbitration clause in their contracts. Arbitration is the thing that allows NDAs to flourish. And so if you get rid of the arbitration clause, you more or less can get rid of NDAs and people can talk about what the culture was like. They're also trying to get a third party to investigate HR policies, and the workers wanted a say in who was hired. The workers did not get a say. The president brought in somebody they didn't like, who's actually very well known for union busting, even though the employees are trying to organize right now. There's all of this kind of stuff. But the most important thing, and the thing I want to talk about today, and this is where we'll focus, is that there's memo evidence that in 2016, all of the higher ups at Activision and Blizzard knew that there were alleged sexual assaults and rapes that happened in their building and among their employees. That at least 2 higher ups at Activision received this memo, and nothing was done. And this is ostensibly after Harvey Weinstein. Or in the midst of all of this. So even watching Harvey Weinstein go down didn't incur them to cover their asses enough to fix their culture. Literally, the state of California had to sue them.
Mm-hmm.
So we want to talk about toxic work cultures and what kind of thing happens in that. Activision is an egregious case. I mean, I am shocked that Microsoft is taking the stand that it's taking, but I love it. Like, even if it's public pressure, I love, like, hey, we're not going to publish your games if you guys don't sort your shit. But they are egregious, and they are public, and they are huge. But this bro culture, this frat boy culture, we've seen it at WeWork. We've heard about it at Uber. We heard about it in lots and lots of industries that cater towards men in their 20s.
Yeah.
And not a lot of equity or safety that is frequently talked about. So that's kind of why we wanted to open today. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Please, if you are an Activision player, if you're a gamer, we'd love to know if you've been following this. But also, let's talk about toxic work cultures. Now that I've set the stage as the gamer in our relationship here, the video game correspondent.
That's right.
Dr. E, what do you have?
Yeah, so, I mean, we talk about toxic culture a lot here. Good doctors. It's a bit of our brand. And, we've focused a lot in the last couple months about institutional abuse and the level of knowledge within institutions that abusive practices are taking place, and how that gets baked into the culture of how it actually operates. And so, on our YouTube right now, we're covering the Hulu series Dopesick. We're talking a lot about the institutional abuse perpetuated by Purdue Pharma. And so, we're focusing on this, yes, there's this particular example, and how can we hold these people accountable, and what do we need to change about gaming culture or bro culture? But also, I think my thought usually when I don't know much about what we're talking about is what are the bigger implications for what does this say to how we build cultures, how we prioritize profit? And like, that's, as you were talking and explaining the story of Blizzard Activision, and saying, like, the state of California had to intervene, and like thinking about Purdue Pharma, because we've been talking about it a lot lately, like, you have to incentivize them or like threaten economic or loss of profit in a lot of ways to get people to move on things, which, is in part capitalism and the nature of it. But even the fact that, and I mean, I skimmed a different article in Games Radar that gives a lot of the details as well. And there was, after the lawsuit was launched, there was a letter going around with 3,000 signatures from Blizzard Activision staff that was mostly in response to the terrible statement that they released in response to the lawsuit. And so, the two things that I want to highlight are, the insidiousness of the culture and what it takes to really dismantle cultures. We talk about this all the time. We talk about, like, we need to dismantle systemic racism and dismantle abusive police and, dismantle misogyny and all these kinds, but like, what does it actually mean and how do we do it? And so I think this is a good example to kind of talk through what that change needs to look like and how we can do it. And then the second point I wanted to make was specifically on that letter that was sent. That it starts at the very top, and that's Drayton Games' comment that you highlighted, it does start at the top, and it doesn't always go all the way to the bottom. So there's a lot of people who play Activision games who love it, who work for Activision, that want to try and change the culture that exists. People behave in cultures in a lot of ways out of self-preservation that might not necessarily like mean that they are specifically condoning the way that culture is behaving and the abuse that it's perpetrating. And we've talked about that with Purdue Pharma as well, and how you get to a stage where we even have whistleblowers.
Mm-hmm.
And as you said, like so many of these people that are whistleblowers have left.
Yeah.
And they're the former employees coming out. So those are my two kind of big bucket points about this. But I think it's a good opportunity to specifically talk about like what would dismantling or changing this culture look like, and how do we do that when so much of it is like the culture of misogyny and the rape culture that just exists, broadly speaking, that is then amplified in some of these industries.
I mean, that's the $64,000 question, right? And this is where I think we can talk about the benevolent patriarchy versus like outright misogyny. So can we dismantle the benevolent patriarchy? No, like just good dudes who have that use their privilege for, neutrality, minor ills, minor goods, it's unexamined patriarchy is benevolent patriarchy. Misogyny, I do have deep belief that we can dismantle. Not only because I've seen it over and over again. There's lots of cultures that were very misogynistic that have been dismantled and rebuilt. What I'll say for this is I completely agree with Mr. J, as Jay informed us, that the top here is the problem. Like Kotick, I mean, in anytime you come in, you have to clean house. I think any organization that's like, well, this is what drove me nuts at Baylor. When we got rid of the football coach and we fired Ken Starr after it came out that Baylor had been systematically underreporting and violating Title IX in terms of sexual assault on campus. But we didn't get rid of the dean of student affairs. And we didn't get rid of the head of security. And those two people were incredibly involved in the culture that happened. And so there are things at Baylor that have changed. The football program no longer recruits aggressive players that need anger management therapy the way Art Briles actually went out and looked for people. We have a different president. Linda Livingstone is trying to do a lot of different things. But at the end of the day, some of the people that oversaw, because it wasn't just the football team, it was the whole campus that allowed this to happen. So like the director of spiritual life is still there.
Yeah.
And he didn't speak up and do anything about it. The dean of students is still there. And my thing was always the campus security, the guy in charge of campus security. I'm sorry. Why is the president leaving and the campus security guy isn't when we're talking about crimes happening on campus? So, I mean, I think from the very first thing that what Activision's current behavior tells me is they're not interested in change.
Yeah.
They're just trying to ride out the shareholders' temper tantrums in their mind. Like, if they were actually interested in change, they would get rid of the arbitration clause. That's not an unrealistic demand. Lots of companies have had to get rid of the arbitration clause now that we have seen it so abused for so long, especially in sexual harassment cases.
Yeah.
And so get rid of the arbitration clause, man. Like, even if you don't want a union, and like, that's a separate conversation, like get rid of the arbitration clause, man. Like just start there. So if you're not going to do that, if it's going to be a lot of lip service, which is Kotick is the current guy. And he says, I'll step down if I'm toxic for the culture. No, buddy, you're already toxic. Take a seat. Like,
I'm like,
it happened on your watch, chicken. Like take a seat.
Where is this if coming from?
Yeah. Like, and I don't think he would even be saying those things out loud if Microsoft and PlayStation, if Microsoft and Sony weren't throwing their weight around.
Yeah. Yeah. And so many times we've seen cultural change come from like economic pressure.
Yeah.
Or like financial pressure. So I'm thinking about like the name change for the team from Washington in the National Football League.
Pressure. Yep.
There was economic pressure because they had sponsors pull out.
Mm-hmm.
Native American activists had been pushing and actively campaigning for decades.
Yeah.
many, many decades to get that name changed. And it
But
wasn't until they actually had
yeah.
sponsors say, we won't sponsor this team anymore if you don't change the name. So hopefully that will indicate maybe eventual change in Activision.
Well, here's the thing you say about that, but then I think like that's a name versus a culture. So the Cleveland baseball team has changed their name, and there's been so much coverage in the last couple of months now that baseball season is over, and legally they are not called the Cleveland Indians anymore, and they are called the Cleveland Guardians. The number of fans that refuse to change the name.
Yeah.
So this is a culture issue as well. So at Activision, you got to clean house, and you have the money. Like WoW makes money hand over fist.
Oh my God.
If
they're swimming in money.
If you don't have the money, then there's been some really poor mismanagement. Like figure out some severance packages, get rid of everybody that signed off on this shit. If they got a memo in the last 5 years that reported any of this and they ignored it, they're gone. Like get really, really merciless. Like this has to you got to excavate the cancer here. And bring in people. I would recommend a lady who is a gamer who loves this thing. I'd recommend her. But bring in some people that want to love games and that want to allow other people to build things they love. Because I mean, like my husband is he's had his feminist awakening. God love John. But he tells stories from his 20s. Like he wasn't great, but if anybody made a rape joke around him, I know he would have said something. And he told me a story about a couple guys sexually harassing one of his cube mates, and he went and reported them. Yeah. He made it stop and he went and reported them. So there is this spirit within the industry to not be toxic misogynbro.
Yeah.
It's there.
Yeah.
Because it's within humanity. And there's lots of us, I don't want to design games, but I meet girls all the time who, when they find out that my husband worked on video games, they're like, can he help me get into the industry? And very sadly, he usually looks at them and says, don't go in.
Yeah.
It's not safe.
Yeah.
Build your own.
And I think it's so sad, right? Because, I'm not a gamer, but I love many of them, you included. And my brother, and John and Brian and so many people. And I know that it can provide community and a sense of belonging, and so much of gaming culture is about, finding space as an outcast or
especially WoW. WoW. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think it's just really tragic that then the flip side of that, in a lot of cases, not just Blizzard Activision, but the flip side of that is this toxic misogynbro culture where people aren't included and where people are, where there's not equity and where there's not acceptance and where there's not, protection for human beings and their rights, innate human rights. But that's one of the complexities of humanity. But I find that I was just as you were talking about it, and I was like, that's so sad, because like I know so many like misfits and outcasts who have found love and family and acceptance in the games that they play, and to have this story be like the focus of it.
Yeah, and I'm glad in a way that, I mean, I'm super glad that California sued them. Like, I'm really, really glad they went after them. And I'm disgusted at some of the things I'm reading. Anyone who wants to dive in, it's even worse than, there's some stories that are worse than anything that we've alluded to here. And this is a crime. These are crimes that have been committed. This isn't just a culture issue. Sexual assault is a criminal activity. There's criminal activity that has been happening.
Yeah.
And so that is, I'm so glad we're not monetized, because YouTube would have demonetized this so fast for this conversation.
So fast.
We didn't say any of the abbreviations we're supposed to say, so YouTube doesn't get mad at us. But I think about the places that I've found home with people, especially fandom. And fandom is toxic as hell too. And so it's, there's just a lot of, we have to continue to call out cultures. So there's no perfect culture is really what I'm trying to get to here too. So like fandom is not, I love that fandom is not a money-making machine, because like it can't, because legally, but if we had this much money attached to some fandoms, like I don't even want to know. and it's just going to be interesting. I want to see, this is a absolutely excellent point from Drayton Games regarding Kotick. He has been CEO for 30 years. I forgot to bring that up. No. And any significant changes he wanted to make, he would have made them already. This is an excellent point. He has no desire to make the changes, and it starts with him and it goes on down. And I'm not super familiar with the names underneath Kotick. So, but if they're part of that clutch of senior leadership, they've got to be on board with him, because that's how leadership teams work. So yeah, this is time to clean house. I don't want anyone to lose the licenses, the games they love. Like, I don't want it to go out of business so that people lose Call of Duty forever, kind of thing. But you got to clean house. Yeah. You got to clean house. And it's a really good thing for the rest of us to chew on as to what is the difference between like a name change and economic pressure versus an actual cultural shift. And what is that going to look like?
Yeah. And like, because I don't want to minimize the impact of changing the name. For a lot of people, it might seem cosmetic. It's very symbolic and very important, but you also have to address the culture underneath it. Mm-hmm. And I use the team from Washington as an example. They're still very similar to the Cleveland Guardians. A lot of the fan base that are upset and do not understand how the name represented a culture that was racist and derogatory towards Native Americans in the way that the fans behaved and the mascot and the rituals and all that kind of stuff. And similarly, here we don't necessarily have a symbol of this, a visual symbol in a name or a logo, but we have this toxic culture all the way throughout. And you're right. If he was going to change anything, he would have changed it already. And he seems to be only interested again in the cosmetic, tick box. I'm going to make a statement about this, and tell people I'm concerned about it, and hopefully it'll just go away. But I'm encouraged that the action being taken by Blizzard Activision employees hopefully means it's not. If they're trying to unionize, if they're writing this letter, they're staging walkouts. Maybe if there's not enough, maybe if there's enough pressure from within the organization, it'll create enough pressure on some of the money behind it and the sponsors and whatnot to actually push for change. So.
And there's a great, somewhere in the 14,000 links Kotaku has, there's a way to support Activision employees if you are not an Activision employee. So there's all those kind of things. And so if that's the way, I talked to a couple people asking if boycotting the games would be helpful. And they kind of said, no, it's not a big enough impact, that the best way is to continue to agitate loudly, to share these things, to share their hashtags, to continue to do those things, call the complaint line and complain, email the company and say, we don't stand for this as gamers. But the economic impact of individual boycott is not going to be nearly as helpful as pressuring Xbox to pull the platforms.
Right. So. We have a question from Jay. Was it the Cleveland team that was still selling their former logo name on items and calling it vintage? Probably.
Yeah, it is. And they are continuing to do it. There was an ESPN article a couple days ago that I did not want to highlight because I didn't want to have to keep talking about this garbage. But evidently we are still talking about this garbage. So.
We're always talking about this garbage. We swim in it. Yeah, sure, because they can make money off of it, and they know they're trying to balance the public pressure to change the name with the not wanting to lose the fan base that makes them hell a lot of money.
And again, if they had wanted to enact real change, all of those teams, including the baseball team from Atlanta, could have done it a long time ago. So we need to acknowledge that there is change, even when change comes about for not the best reasons that we would love. Change is still change, and so let's embrace that. But let's stop from there. And then no, Jay is apologizing because she's Canadian for bringing that up. Don't apologize at all. It's a good point to bring up. It was just one of those days where I was reading Twitter and I was tired. I was just really tired.
Yeah. Yeah. So, no apologies necessary. We probably would have brought it up ourselves eventually.
Yeah. So I think that's all I've got for
Yeah.
now. If you or anybody who's on the replay crew, we would love to hear your thoughts as always. We treasure every single one. We'd love to continue this conversation. We will continue to cover this. I know as the court goes, it's a trial. It's going to be an actual jury trial. So as it goes to trial, I'm sure Emily D. Baker will be covering it. And so we will be watching her coverage.
You know she will.
And we'll be getting hopefully some secondhand legal analysis for you guys, try to understand some of the stuff. I don't know California law at all. But she does. She was a district attorney in Los Angeles County. So hopefully she can really help us understand some of this. And we'll be keeping an eye. In the meantime, our deep hope for you is that the things that bring you joy don't make other people grieve. And if they do, that you can find ways to cultivate joy and enact justice as we move through this season of anticipation of wholeness, which is really what December is for so many of us. And that's it. We're off next week, actually. So Jay, you're off the hook. Dr. Aaron is going to be traveling, and I am going to be on campus at Charleston Southern doing some work with our friends and family down there. And so we'll see you for the Good Doctors Live on the 14th of December, when we will be joined again by Cheryl West-Lung, who you may have remembered from a while ago. And she's going to be talking about COVID on college campuses and the grant that she helped run for the last couple of months, and figuring out how college kids are still faring as this thing doesn't have an end, and what Omicron will mean for them, et cetera, et cetera. Cheryl and I will be together. We'll be coming to you from the campus of Baylor University and be talking to Dr. Aaron and you guys all together. So we will see you somewhere else in the YouTubes between now and then, definitely. But we will hopefully see you for the next live on December 14th.
Take care, everybody.